Hi, this is Travis Shaw with the Virginia Piedmont Heritage Area, wrapping up today's exploration of George Washington's journeys through the Heritage Area at a spot that would have been intimately familiar to Washington, both during his travels as a young officer in the French and Indian War and later on as a prominent planter and land speculator. The spot that I'm standing at is known today as Keyes Gap. It's located at the very edge of the Heritage Area in northwestern Loudoun County, and it marks one of the more prominent crossings through the Blue Ridge Mountains and across the Shenandoah River in the 18th century. Washington would have traversed this spot several times. Earlier today, we were on a portion of what was known as the Vestal's Gap Road. Well, in the 1750s, this is Vestal's Gap, named after John Vestal, who ran a prominent ferry crossing just behind me, just down the hill, where the Shenandoah River flows through the upper Shenandoah Valley and into the Potomac. Washington crossed here at Vestal's Gap in 1754 with his detachment that went west, eventually to confront the French at Jumonville Glen and Fort Necessity. He is also going to cross at Vestal's Gap at several other points during the French and Indian War as the commander of the Virginia Regiment. Vestal's Gap is one of the best crossing points for troops marching westwards towards Winchester, towards the Virginia frontier. So as Washington is taking troops to guard the frontier, this is going to become a major thoroughfare. Now, Washington is going to return to Vestal's Gap later on in his career in the 1780s. In 1784, just a few months after leaving the leadership of the Continental Army at the end of the Revolutionary War, Washington is going to take a renewed interest in his western lands. Over the course of his career as a surveyor, he is going to amass tens of thousands of acres of land in western Virginia, what is now West Virginia, Ohio. He's going to add on to those lands after the Revolution. And one of the difficulties is that, transportation, communication is very slow during this era. He's left the management of these lands in the hands of some overseers that are not the most scrupulous of businessmen, don't necessarily pay much attention to who's squatting on the land or whether the settlers there are paying their rents. And so in 1784, Washington is going to take a journey out to those lands to really take a personal hold on what's going on, take a personal interest in what's going on. And so he's going to set out on a journey. He's going to be joined by his doctor, James Craig, James Craig's son. His nephew, Bushrod, is going to accompany him. Several of the enslaved members of Washington's household are going to come out as servants for this expedition, and they're going to set out through Leesburg. They're going to stay at Mr. Huff's house there in Leesburg, a personal friend of Washington's. And they are going to set out across the Blue Ridge, crossing here at what was then known as Keyes Gap or Keyes Ferry, before meeting with several prominent local businessmen. That's going to include Warner Washington, George Washington's cousin, Daniel Morgan, an officer who had served prominently alongside Washington in the Revolution, Mr. Snicker, whose family gives the name to Snicker's Gap, just nearby. And together they're going to have a conference on what westward expansion is going to mean for the future of the young nation. Washington, he owns a lot of land in the Ohio country out on the frontier. Many of these other businessmen that join him also have interests in the area. And they're going to talk about a scheme to connect the western frontier to the Tidewater region. And that is going to come in the form of a Potomac River Canal. This is going to precede the C&O Canal by several decades, but the idea is tying the western frontier to the Tidewater, to the ports of Alexandria, Baltimore, and be able to better, what's the word I'm thinking of? Facilitate the movement of people, goods, money from these two regions and tie the new nation together economically and politically. And so Washington is going to become one of the main backers of this Potomac River Canal. Now, the canal never really goes anywhere. Several portions are built but the full dream is not realized until several decades after Washington's death with the creation of the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. You can, however, still see some of the vestiges of that canal today. Some of the portions of the canal still exist outside Harper's Ferry, just nearby where we're standing now. Some of the best remains are in Fairfax County along Great Falls. You can see the remains of Matildaville and some of the infrastructure of the canal there. Now, this really speaks to Washington's vision for the nation. You know, this is land that he has traversed as a surveyor, as an officer. He's been out on the frontier. He sees the promise of the frontier, the natural resources that are there. So, you know, it really stands as a vestige and as a testament to Washington's vision. And it's a vision that really coalesces around places like Keyes Gap. So we encourage you guys, you know, we didn't touch upon every single spot that Washington ever slept at or visited in the heritage area, but we encourage you guys to go out and visit some of these sites that we've seen today and to further explore the legacy of Washington in the Virginia Piedmont.